It's kind of interesting to think what kind of crazy journey led to what episode we got last night. Just this satisfying, kind of bittersweet ending to a series that started back in what, 2002, 2003? When you think about it, Samurai Jack ended fairly abruptly on Cartoon Network. There were rumors floating around about what's going to happen with Season 5, or what's Gindy's next big project. We get as far as seeing Symbionic Titan back in 2010. That's ended prematurely, or rather, production was rushed because of some kind of disagreement between the production crew and Cartoon Network, and rumors about it's not conducive to toy sales, so it's going to get trash canned just like Young Justice and a whole bunch of other crapola. As that continued snowballing, Gindy ended up leaving Cartoon Network, had his Hollywood debut as a movie director, handed a movie that had 7 other freaking directors, Hotel Transylvania, and managed to make something serviceable out of it, or they made something serviceable out of it anyway. Successful enough that it got a sequel. Actually, at that particular point in time, I was pretty much doubting that there'd be any kind of future for any of Gindy's productions. I thought he'd pretty much just turned over a new leaf and yeah, he'd made it in the big time. He was working in the big leagues over in Hollywood. Last thing I heard was that he tried to get a Popeye reboot up and running. It looked pretty promising. He really brought the kind of stretchy, rubbery dynamics you'd see in 1920s animation, bringing the original charm to a CGI production. In other words, it was the kind of translation for what would work really well. You know the Charlie Brown CGI movie? Where they managed to install the kind of charm and well, yeah, just the charm and innocence you'd find in the original Charlie Brown. The visuals and the story, everybody on it really knew what they were doing. They breathed new life, or put a modern spin, on what was a very beloved, nostalgic classic. They managed to turn it into their own thing. I really think Gindy could have done the same with Popeye. It's just disappointing that that one didn't get greenlit or pushed through. That was disappointing. And then after you have that disappointment, suddenly there's rumors burbling and news that Cartoon Network decided to greenlight Samurai Jack. And lo and behold, a couple months ago, we get the official premiere date on Adult Swim, and it's just been kind of this crazy ride. It goes from, what should we expect from this? Is it just going to be this really dark, edgy... Is it going to be more dark and edgy than before because now it's adult and it can get away with more things? Not necessarily. There's a lot of things about the new season that really hold the original spirit. And, yeah, just the original spirit and attitude of what the original Samurai Jack had. Samurai Jack has always been a bit over the top, a love letter to genres all across the board. The basic premise, if you think about it, is you have a classic samurai character pitted into a bunch of different, really absurd, over-the-top situations. You could have... He's been in an episode where he was pretty much the star of his own fairy tale, with the two-headed sea monster that could grant wishes. You have him in sci-fi B-movie plots. You have him in a spaghetti western that takes place in a dystopian future. It's pretty much, what's the most ridiculous or interesting situation we can put a classic samurai character in, and then just sort of spool it out and see where things go from there. It can be anywhere from lighthearted, goofy, and over the top, which is pretty much any outing you have with the boisterous Scotsman, to kind of low-key serious and really makes you stop and think, like the episode where Jack meets up with the monks on the side of the mountain and reconnects with the spiritual purpose, what started him out on his journey in the first place. While Season 5 has quite possibly one of the most dramatic and really in-depth looks into Jack's psyche, that's really the strength of where Season 5 starts out, looking into what kind of PTSD he has going on, what kind of mental stress and trauma he's been going through, because 50 years without reaching his goal and just wandering around aimlessly. feeling like he's lost, because not only has he lost the sword, but he doesn't even stop and connect with the people he saves anymore. He used to go out of his way to really get to know them, to establish some kind of connection and remind himself why his mission is worth it. That he's not just rescuing his own people, that there is an entire world to be rescued from Aku. That it's a very thankless, daunting position, but one somebody has to step up and do. And getting these little, touching base with these people and getting little signatures of gratitude, that's probably part of what kept him going, what kept his fire burning, for lack of a better way to describe it. So you have this, and then it transitions to what kind of rugged, worn down shell of a man Jack is in season 5. Now, you do have the scene where he thinks he's committed one of the worst sins or atrocities he could. It goes from killing the daughters of Aku to Jack sincerely believing that he's murdered a room full of young children. And that since he's reached this point, there's no coming back. He's reached the very edge. What I find interesting is that this isn't the first time that Jack has felt daunted and was sorely tempted to give up. There's another episode in earlier seasons of the show where they implied that he was seriously considering committing suicide at an earlier point in time. And he had a similarly daunting and meaningful spiritual mission where the end result was, you have a rough journey, but the journey is what's worth it. Something like that. He ran into some kind of very spiritual presence. One that pushed him back onto his journey and got him back up and going again. So, while the most recent outing introduces... Okay, trying to think of the best way to phrase this since I'm really just doing this off the cuff. Probably shouldn't be, but... Okay, so the biggest thing about season 5, other than a really, really in-depth look at Jack's scattered psyche, is that Ashi is introduced. I've seen discussion from fans or speculations about what if Jack had a permanent companion? Or why doesn't Jack have someone that he can bounce off of or trade notes or comments with? Somebody that could help share the burden of his mission. The Scotsman plays this role to some degree, but he seems more like a fun, over-the-top, or buddy cop companion that shows up every once in a while. He's a confidant, but not necessarily the kind of emotional support that really helped Jack in a meaningful or astounding ways. And I think after really looking back and reviewing what kind of toll it'd take on Jack, you can only go so long with presenting Jack as, well, just this character archetype. This persistent, seeking, do-gooding fellow. The hero who will stop at nothing to reach his goal. Considering how long has passed and revisiting this project, I'm glad that they went the direction that they did, that they decided to try having a more overarching story over the course of this particular season, that they decided to explore the more dramatic aspects of Jack's character, that they took episodes with spiritual guides and presences and made that an overarching theme, that these were entities that Jack was actively communicating with, rather than just a one-off stint where just takes a couple of days off to go on some kind of spiritual journey or adventure, and that automatically cures him. I've had discussions with my brother about the later episode where Jack has an internal journey or goes on a meditative type journey and he makes tea and then suddenly he returns to his former self. From the Dark Samurai and all the other spiritual guys you've had showing up over the course of season 5, this was foreshadowed and built up to. It was built up to. So it really isn't from out of nowhere. But back to discussing what kind of role Ashi plays. After shelving this project for close to 10 years, if someone was going to return to it, and you consider looking at Jack or what he's been going through, doesn't it make sense to entertain the idea of introducing a character that play off of him or be some kind of foil or emotional support for what kind of situation he's in? With how broken a character Jack has become, Ashi started out as very welcome. She played a big role in helping Jack reestablish or find himself again. That's really what kind of role she played. The kind of role that I and possibly a lot of other fans were wondering would ever get introduced in the show, or that kind of role would be explored. Though, yeah, where or what kind of direction they took with Ashi's character, her relationship with Jack, that's opening a can of worms. That's gotten a mixed bag reaction from quite a few different people, if you think about it. I'll admit that I was in the camp of people that was really leaning more towards a father-daughter or mentor-student kind of dynamic. That's just what it felt like it was building up to, considering Ashi was raised to be hell-bent on destroy the samurai and evil, corrupt Aku is all. And her turnaround into somebody who can pick up on subtle language or really coyly hint at, hey Jack, did you have a previous love interest? This kind of shift to somebody from someone incredibly naive and unknowing about the world at large and what it means, to go from that to somebody incredibly knowledgeable on the smaller, more subtle indicators or parts of human language, that's a very hard sell for me. That is a very hard sell. I'm not looking for something incredibly... I'd be willing to excuse that. I'd be willing to accept it or overlook it. If anything, Ashi's character development or the way she was built up, I like this character. I just wish there'd been 26 episodes in season 5. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I wish they would have had 26 episodes so you could have more meandering and Ashi character development. So you could have a couple more episodes of her wandering around in the desert, for lack of a better way to describe it. Meeting some of Jack's old friends, finding herself and her true identity, and becoming more than just reformed daughter of Aku, exploring more of this leaf girl identity that she had going on for a while. Maybe even just exploring aspects of her character that didn't get as fleshed out and developed as I would have liked. I like the idea of Ashi being in tune with the senses, being able to pick up on things about people relatively well, or just having a stronger sense of empathy than others. Like, refining and developing this to a point where she could understand Jack in that particular kind of respect. That even though she'd only be immersed in human society or even culture at large for a shorter amount of time, there's a really meaningful aspect or idea behind Ashi being or becoming a really compassionate and empathetic person. It's the exact opposite from what she was raised to be, showing that she has indeed overcome her dark, really kind of tragic past. The biggest thing overall with season 5, the biggest thing I really have to say about it, it just felt rushed in some respects. They needed more time. They needed more episodes to really explore and get the full gist or the full impact they wanted to go for. Ashi would have had that much more of an impact if there would have been more time with her. Don't get me wrong, the ending is still incredibly sad and has a bittersweet kind of tone to it. but it just doesn't have that kind of punch or impact that it could have if Ashi had just been a little bit more fleshed out, just had a little bit more character development. Had a little bit more of a defined character other than just kind of somewhere between two-dimensional character and just support role at this particular point in time, for lack of a better way to describe it. Since I'm just kind of rambling and stuff here, I'm going to bring up something that the ending, or the very last episode, really brought to mind. Ashi disappearing. It reminded me a lot of what happened with Nia Teplin in Gurren Lagann. Okay, now this is going to be a bit of a stretch in regards to compare and contrast. In regards to Gurren Lagann, Nia holds a fairly similar role to what Ashi does. Well, narrative-wise anyway. So, shortly after Simone's mentor figure, big brother figure dies, the guy that he really looks up to and kind of shapes who he's determined to become and whose shoes he has to fill, what role and responsibilities he has to take on. When Nia comes into the picture, another YouTube reviewer, or rather anime reviewer, described her as very feminine, a very different role from what his mentor figure played. She was the helpmate, the support role. Someone that Simone could relate to and rely on in such a way, or a dynamic that really boosted his confidence, really encouraged him, gave him someone to look out for and to care and help. This kind of supportive balance role that he didn't really find with anyone else. I'm not saying that anybody else in the group didn't really have this kind of dynamic with them, but it felt like Nia had the strongest impact. Like, she was his emotional anchor, for lack of a better way to describe it. She was the person that he could talk to behind closed doors, that he could really truly be vulnerable around and still be her hero, or whatever else. And then, when you get to the later half of the series, it's that much more. It really punches the viewer in the gut when it turns out she's a big puppet, or she's being used as a chess piece or tool on behalf of this bigger bad guy, this evil entity. She's endeared herself enough to the audience and viewers. She's a core enough part of Simone's character, and even ingrained herself into the cast at large, that it's depressing that in order to defeat the bad guy and restore some kind of peace or harmony to this universe's world, it means Nia can't exist. It means she's got to go. There's a lot more weight attached to the idea that Nia is so ingrained into this bad guy, into this entity, that it really boils down to the world versus her. That kind of dynamic or setup. In Samurai Jack, you definitely had the foundation for a similar case. That there's a very similar tragedy, weight, and impact to Ashi holding that kind of role. That it comes down to Jack would have to pick between a world with her in Aku or a world without her in Aku. But it just feels like her character wasn't there long enough to hammer in that kind of impact, the kind of weight that Nia Teplin had in Gurren Lagann. She had the potential. It's still a very bittersweet ending. Feel free to disagree with me on this. But what happened there at the end, that they got as far as a wedding scene where Jack and Ashi were planning a future together. It kind of comes out of nowhere, or feels really hollow, when Ashi says that she needs Aku to exist. When Simone and Nia get as far as stepping up on the altar, they both know what's going to happen. They know the weight and the consequences. There's just a stronger sense of urgency, or just more of a bittersweet ending when Nia disappears when compared to Ashi. It feels like her disappearing came across as a shock to everybody, including Jack. That he was just robbed blind of his happy ending, his happy fairy tale ending. To be brutally honest, the way that season 5 is set up, I would have been okay with Ashi somehow being alive and getting married to Jack and having that happy, sappy ending. I would have been okay with that. I honestly would have preferred it. Again, the ending here, it just feels hollow. There is a lot of sentimentality, and I like the symbolic meaning with the ladybug and the ambiguity that Ashi may still be out there or whatever else, but the lead up to this particular scene, to her being an instrumental part of defeating Aku, it just doesn't have as much weight or impact as what it could have. If we'd gotten a full 26 episodes, more Ashi character development, it would have resonated that much more strongly, in my opinion. I still absolutely love season 5 of Samurai Jack. I'm glad that they were able to go out with pretty much a bang. These really are more nitpicks, or, God, I wanted to see this series get stretched out. I wanted to see season 5 get the same treatment, or just something slightly, just get the full 26 episodes that any other season of Samurai Jack did, to get the meandering and the world exploration and development, just some more of a balance between the more serious elements and tongue-in-cheek that other seasons could get. The season starts out serious, and then you have fun tongue-in-cheek episodes like the sci-fi B-movie where Jack and Ashi fall in love with each other, and the Aku's midlife crisis, for lack of a better way to describe it. You have these pitted against Jack's internal monologue, his psychological dilemma, his being close to committing, just the biggest thing I really have to say about this is I wish they'd had more time. I really wish they'd had more time in episodes. I'll go so far as saying, if there's enough ratings and traction, and Gindi would be up for a season 6, yes, season 6, and give them 26 episodes to work with. Let them turn it around. Let them go nuts. You could even have an entire season with the Scotsman, and I would be a very happy camper.